Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this special unsung event. Composer Thea Musgrave has graciously joined us today to speak with our artistic director, Ariel Pisturino, about music and creation. Thea is known primarily for her orchestral works and her operas and shows no sign of retiring. She recently celebrated her 93rd birthday and still writes every day. We are honored to have her with us.
Well, Thea, welcome and thank you so much for being here. We are so honored that you'd sit down with us for a little chat today.
Well, great pleasure to meet you, even though it's online.
Yes. What or who inspired you to become a composer?
Well, I don't really remember. However, I do remember my very first piano lesson, and I guess that's the sort of route that most people take because they have, most composers take because they have played an instrument and enjoyed music and then gradually grows into wanting to write music. Anyway, my very first piano lesson, I think I was about 5 years old, and I went to a little primary school in Edinburgh, my hometown, Scotland. And I went into the room, and there was Miss Baxter. And so she said, "Hello, darling." It was an upright piano. And so she said, "Come and stand on the seat here." And I looked a little surprised, because usually you sit on seats, right, ready to play the keyboard. She said, "No, come and stand here." And she opened the lid and she said, "And look down through, where the lid was. Just look down there." And then she started to play herself on the keyboard. So I saw all these hammers going like this, as she played. That was fascinating. And I think that simple thing that she did, all teachers remember this. If you have a young kid that you're teaching, it's unbelievable. That's what really caught me. Anyway, I used to spend a lot of time at the piano, not because I was forced to, because you have to play your scales, because I loved doing it and just playing around. And I did that really all the time I was growing up. And I think at some point I started to invent things. However, I did not plan to be a composer. I was in medical school. I was in pre-med, to be exact, because I had done the wrong subjects at school. I didn't have enough of the science subjects. So I was in pre-med. And why I wanted to be in medicine was I had decided that, with the arrogance of youth, I was going to discover the cures for all the diseases. No COVID, of course, in those days, but, tuberculosis, smallpox, you name it. I was going to discover the cure. Well, in pre-med, you get to cut up frogs and you get to do chemistry, and it was really pretty boring. And I sort of thought I wasn't going to get to my ambition this way. And it so happens in Edinburgh, the university, that the medical school is absolutely adjacent to the music school. They share the same walls, in fact. So I found myself going into the music school to see what was happening. And I found that just much, much, much more interesting. So that's what happened. Why I became a composer, just one thing led to another.
That makes sense. But music and medicine frequently go hand in hand.
That's what I've heard. And apparently there are doctors' orchestras all over the place, which I think is wonderful.
Yes, there are actually several here in Southern California where a doctor is also the conductor of an orchestra.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it must use the same parts of your brain or something. I don't know. So do you have a favorite instrument that you like to write for?
Well, yeah, I have something to tell you about that. I think that it's very, very important, the relationship of a composer with performers. And when I was teaching, I always said to my students, make friends with the good performers and then pick their brains mercilessly, because there's no way you can play all the instruments yourself. There's just no way. When they spend each instrument, 4 or 5 hours a day practicing and learning and so on, you can't do that. So you have to rely on their expertise and what they can tell you. And I have been very lucky with that. one of the first people, I'm going to mention 4 or 5 instruments because, through my life, that's what happened. The first person that I'm going to talk about is an incredible horn player. I'm talking about London because that's where I was when this happened, called Barry Tuckwell. He was Australian, but he was the first horn in the London Symphony Orchestra, and then he became a soloist, and he is absolutely fabulous. He also played at, what's it called in Juilliard, the Juilliard Lincoln Center Chamber Players. He was a member of that, so he was in this country, well, as a soloist and playing concertos all over the place, all over the world, actually. He was really famous. And anyway, he asked me to write a piece for him with horn and piano. And so that's how I got started. And then I wrote a concerto for him, which was very exciting. So that's number one. So I picked his brains and he taught me all sorts of things that you can't find in any orchestration book at all, just not there. So, this personal contact, I would say with any young composer, you must learn from the performers and get with them and listen to them play and learn about it. The next instrument I loved was the clarinet. Another person from the London Symphony Orchestra, Gervais de Paya, who also played with the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Players. And I wrote a clarinet concerto for him. And actually, that clarinet concerto had I think it was the American premiere with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, with a wonderful, is it Michelle Zukovsky, who used to be the first clarinet with that orchestra. Actually, when she played this, it was her father who was the first clarinet. And then later on, she became first clarinet. And I think she's now retired because this was way back in the 70s. I mean, eons ago. Anyway, she was fabulous. But I didn't learn from her because it had already been written. But I would have learned from her had it been you. Then, of course, we come to the viola. Well, I played the viola myself very, very, very badly because I never practiced. But I'm glad I did because I had a sort of idea what it was like. And also I played in the students' orchestra. And I also played with friends who were equally bad as I was, chamber music in the evenings, which was enormous fun. And then, of course, when I married my husband, Peter Mark, was a wonderful viola player. So he got a concerto written for him, which I conducted with him playing for the BBC Proms, which are a wonderful series of concerts over the summer in the Albert Hall. And that was just a fabulous experience. And of course, I picked his brains mercilessly like the others. Then comes the oboe. This happens, a number of years later. They all seem to be, well, Peter's American, of course. The others are all British. I met an incredible oboe player called Nicholas Daniel. He comes a lot to Los Angeles because he's one of the members of the Camerata Pacifica. And so they bring him all the way from London to play with them. And he is absolutely extraordinary. So again, I wrote him a concerto, Helios, the sun god. He was a sun god. And I had some dramatic things in that work. And because he was a sun god, he arrived to play it in a bright red dinner jacket.
Oh, yes.
Which I love.
Amazing.
Just great. Yeah, it was just great. And then finally, just recently, the trumpet has become my favorite instrument because I met Alison Balsam and she asked me to write her a trumpet concerto. This was just very recent. I think I wrote it, 2-3 years ago, very recently. And it was a great pleasure getting to meet her. And of course, I picked her brain mercilessly, like all the other performers. And I learned a lot about the trumpet. So that's what I say. I think my favorite instrument is what I'm working on right now, with whatever it happens to be, particularly if I have a performer or a singer that I can communicate with and find out whether what I have written is practical and not unnecessarily difficult, just for the sake of being difficult. I always said to my students, don't write it just to be difficult. Only write it because that's what you have to write. And you find the easiest way to notate it so the performer can give it his all.
Wonderful advice. I
Yeah.
hope all upcoming composers take this advice to work with every instrument that they're able to and pick the brains of the performers they get to work with, and what wonderful experiences you've had to get to do
Yeah.
that over the
It's
years.
been very exciting working with a different performer, a new performer, and learning from them. Always exciting. And the kind of what they give when they come to a live performance, it's just mind-boggling.
So, how do you go about choosing your text? And do you also use text to inspire you to write your orchestral pieces?
I write my own text in opera, and that happened for a very simple reason. I was working on Mary Queen of Scots, which I felt I'm the only person who can write that about Mary because I'm a woman and because I'm from Scotland and because I studied in France, the three essential things that she also had, not much else in common, but those three things in common.
That makes
And
sense.
so I got a wonderful text, and there came to one moment when there was a wonderful bit of writing, but it was far, far, far too long. And it was something that had to be sung slowly because that was the nature of what was being said. And I said, this simply lasts too long. And you've written great words, but I have to cut it. I'm really sorry about that. And she was very upset. So I thought, I'm going to write my own. Then I can respond to the needs of the music and the drama. You can't have something last too long because you interrupt the dramatic flow, which is, after all, what opera is about. And also the way the words lie on the musical line. Words come first normally, but sometimes a musical line comes first and you need to find the words to go with. That's unusual, but you need to find the words to go with the line. If I write my own, I can change my mind and I can, do different things. This is too long, this is too short, this is a wrong word. For instance, one specific example, if you use the word with an E vowel, like sweep or sleep or something like that, a soprano cannot sing that vowel up high on a top G or an A. It turns into an ah. They can't sing E. Men can do that on a top G for a man. They can sing sleep, but women can't. So you've got to find a word where you have an ah sound and a nice consonant beginning and end to set it off. So, these are the reasons why I find my own words for opera. However, if I'm asked to write a piece for chorus, then I have several questions. First of all, how long do they want? So that depends on the length of the poem and whether it's fast or slow. If it's something which obviously has to be slow because of the nature of the text, then you need fewer words. They say we want a 5-minute piece, then you have to sort of choose a poem accordingly. Probably something the length of a sonnet would be about right. But if it's a whole page long, that's not going to work. So you have to look for the size and fit it to what you are being asked to write. Then what sort of occasion is it? And who is it for? Is it for kids or is it for adults? If you're writing for kids, you obviously need to choose the kind of words that you think they would enjoy and not something very serious and philosophical. So you have to choose something appropriate for the occasion. But one work that I wrote recently called The Voices of Our Ancestors, it happened by chance. I was just leafing. I have hundreds of books of poems all over here. I don't know if you can see. And I was leafing through and my eye settled on this incredible poem, which I've got here to read a little bit.
Oh, wonderful.
The poem of creation, I think it's called. And let me just quickly read it, and I think you see why I was absolutely hooked. Hold on. Here it is. It's about creation. Who verily knows, and who can here declare it, whence it was born, and whence comes this creation? The gods are later than this world's production. Who knows then whence it first came into being? He, the first origin of this creation, whether he formed it all or did not form it, whose eye controls this word in highest heaven, he verily knows it, or perhaps he knows it not. I mean, I just thought that was incredible. And I found that this poem, it said it was from about 500 BC. Imagine that, all those years ago. Well, round about the time I was thinking about this poem and how to do it and what other poems to put with it, we went out to lunch with some friends, and their son speaks Sanskrit and was in an ashram at the time. So I said, "Oh, you must know this poem." He said, "Yes, of course." I said, "Oh my God, it's from 500 BC. He said, "No, no, no, no. It's from at least 2000 BC. It was just written down in 500 BC. People had to learn things from memory and retain it that way." Anyway, so this poem really got me hooked. And I thought, I have to find a whole lot of other, this was going to be quite a long work of about half an hour. So I needed either the same poem or different poems. And I decided to make choice of different poems. And I wanted to find texts from different languages that were current at that time. So I looked for poems, though I wanted to also have some Arabic poems, so it had to go into the 9th century. But I looked at a wonderful poem from the 15th century, far, far too modern. That just wouldn't work for this set of things. So I found poems from, let's see, Vedic, Sanskrit, Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Chinese, Latin, Greek, and Egyptian. Fortunately, they were all in English, had English translations that were out of copyright. Very lucky. And so I made a kind of a suite of all these different poems. Now, the year that I spent writing this, I was in conversation with voices from 2000 BC, from, right up till the 10th century in our common era. So it was absolutely fascinating. I wished I could have talked to them. I'd explained about the internet, but they were talking to me. I found we had all these things in common. I understood exactly what they were saying about the human emotions that we all have. It was an incredible journey. So that was chance. If you're invited to write something that you need words for, sometimes you just find words by a happy accident, or you go to the library, or you look up books, or you go to Google or whatever, and you just see something that's going to answer what you need.
That is really amazing. And thinking that it was said out loud 2000 BC, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just incredible.
And we understand it, and we can feel with it and question it and so on.
We still
Fascinating.
relate to those people, in
Yeah.
the past. It's kind of amazing. And hopefully the people in the future will also relate.
Hope so.
So I was reading the article about you receiving the Ivor Novello Awards. Congratulations on that.
Very exciting.
Yes. And so it's my understanding those awards are actually more focused on pop music, right?
Yeah, it's mostly pop, but they have one. Oh, here it is.
Oh, fabulous.
And it's very heavy, so Peter is holding it for me down a little bit there.
But you won the Classical Music Award for this honor.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was very honored indeed. Yes.
Yes. I love I love the fact that a pop music awards show basically also has a classical music award, and that you got to be with people like Ed Sheeran, for example. That just the thought of that makes me happy.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. And something also very special about it is that it honors British and Irish songwriters and composers.
Yeah,
But you're Scottish.
I'm Scottish. Yes.
How did you slip in? So you mentioned some of the advice that you actually gave to these young composers coming up, making friends with performers, learning about as many instruments as you can, working with these performers, being true to yourself. But one other thing you mentioned was needing ideas and passion, but also good technique and finding yourself a good teacher.
You do need some technique, and whatever it is you want to write, you do have to find way to write it properly and learn the technique. Very, very important. But there's something else I'd like to say. I don't know what will happen in the future. It depends who the composers are and what ideas they have and what happens in the world. And there's no way to foretell that. But there's one thing I do hope, and it's something that Nick Daniel, the wonderful oboe player that I know, has done. He has managed to raise some money to enable schools to have instruments available for their young students. Not that they should become professional, I mean, unless they really want to, but that they learn an instrument and play, presumably in orchestras or in chamber music or with their friends. And I think that that is really wonderful, because that also means that when they go to concerts, they will enjoy it more because they have some experience of it. And it would also help music in general and composers if they have other young people coming to the concerts and so on. And I think it also, I'm told that it really helps education. If you have learn about music, it also helps your brain develop so that you can learn about all sorts of other things, so that music is not just the emotional response that you have, but also other things as well. So I think that that's so important, and I admire Nick Daniel very much for doing that and helping young people to have this kind of opportunity.
That's really wonderful. It's so
Yeah,
important for anyone to have a well-rounded
yeah.
education.
I mean, we talked about doctors' orchestras, so that even people who have a wonderful different profession, they still can come to music for, their time off and to play with colleagues and to enjoy it, and for music to be part of their life, though it's not their professional life, but for their personal life.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, even you as a composer, you studied medicine, so you have an appreciation of it.
Yeah, I have an appreciation of what they do.
Yeah, and it
I'm
can go
keeping
the
it
other way
well.
too.
And
Yes.
discovering the cure for COVID.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
It just makes me think we need all kinds of different people in the world. We need to study everything as much as we can. It'll lead us to have a better understanding of each other in
That's
the end.
true. Yes.
Yes. One thing I did read, and also in the article, which I loved that you said this, sort of leading us into what maybe you would like to see in the future of new music, is you said you love the classics. You also wish that more orchestras and opera companies would produce contemporary works.
Yes, of course. Not just mine, but also my colleagues that I know, so that you hear everything. The companies who do this need to know that if you're starting with a young composer who is just starting out, you have to be sure that that person has had some training and has the technique to do it. Because if they have a bad start, that doesn't help anybody. They do need to be prepared. They have to be prepared.
And lastly, by the time that this airs, you would have had a US premiere of your trumpet concerto at the Hollywood Bowl.
I know, that's very exciting. This is the trumpet player I mentioned, Alison Balsam, who is
Yes.
absolutely fabulous. And I had a wonderful experience writing that, because just after she asked me if I would write it, by chance I was going up to Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Festival, where I had an orchestral work being performed. And I have in Edinburgh a very good friend who is an artist. And she said she had an exhibition. So, of course, we went. And I walked into the room where the exhibition was, and there was this painting of a tree. And suddenly it absolutely hit me. I said, that's my trumpet concerto, that tree. And people looked at me as I totally crazy. And what I saw in the tree was the sort of branching out and reaching out to as if to other people. So it sort of seemed to me as if the trumpet was reaching out to play with other colleagues. And so that's in a way what I did in the concerto. But first of all, I asked Victoria Crow, I said, I have this crazy idea. And would you allow me to kind of use your pictures? I'm going to choose several pictures and make a kind of series of them when it's done in a concert. And I'd like to have your pictures printed in the program so people can all enjoy your work. And she said, she was kind of a little stunned. And she said, yes. So I went around the exhibition and chose several pictures that I thought might be interesting to work in this way. And then, of course, I kind of, as the work developed, I chose which pictures would go where. And so through the work, the trumpet is reaching out to various colleagues, to first the clarinets, to the brass, to the horns, and finally to an offstage trumpet who eventually comes on stage to play with her. So, and a wonderful picture I chose for that. So that was very exciting and rather unusual. I didn't expect to go to an exhibition and see a tree and find that that was what inspired my work. And I think Ali was a little surprised too, but then she got really with it and played like an angel. It's already been played in England and Germany, but this will have been the American premiere.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. It just goes to show inspiration can come from any place.
Yes, well, you never know what trees can do.
Yes, that's right. Will this be your first piece played at the Hollywood Bowl?
In the Hollywood Bowl, yes, I've had work done by the Los Angeles Phil, which is the clarinet concerto, but that was a long time ago. It was the first, I've been to the Bowl, of course, but it's the first time a work of mine has been played. So I'm very excited about that. And very glad that
Wonderful.
the COVID has kind of opened up. So, and thank goodness, my heart goes out to all the musicians who have been kind of laid off for a whole year. I mean, that's a terrible situation. And so hopefully this is one way they'll be coming back and work will start to flow again.
Agreed. Well, I know a lot of people who have tickets and who are really
Yeah,
excited to see it. So,
great. Hope so.
congratulations. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This is really nice to chat with you. I'm so honored you would do this for us. So, really, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Hope to meet you in person.
Yes.